Today I'm going to talk about how meditations heal the body from a medical research to ancient Buddhist scriptures, especially in Pali canon. As we all know, next slide, please. As you can see, a major factor that makes Buddhism so appealing, to modern people nowadays, contributing to its recent growth, is actually its empirical teachings, which invites investigations by reason and by direct knowledge of direct experience. So this empirical and pragmatic spirit in Buddhism is quite distinct from other religions and make it really particularly relevant to the modern era, where the evidence-based scientific inquiry becomes hegemonic to discovery of knowledge. So in recent decades, much collaborations has been initiated between scientific community and the Buddhist practitioners, especially Buddhist monks, and to look at what will be the health properties or health effects of meditations can do to humans. The positive findings attesting to the potential health effects or health benefits of meditations started to grow and accumulate in momentum. And you can see that in starting to grow in notable scientific publications in Science and frequently reported, in various mainstream media and reputable media. Next slide. This graph actually shows the peer-reviewed scientific publications count, or hits on the keyword, meditation and health, and mine from the largest public science database, Medline or PubMed, or National Library, Public Library of Science, I'm not sure, in America. And we can see that, the scientific publications on meditation and health started very sparingly from 1973 to 1979, with less than 15 hits of publication hits a year. Next slide. Okay?
Yeah.
Okay. But however, starting from 1998 to early 2000, we started to see an astounding growth, exponential growth in scientific publications on meditation and health, right? And here, the number of publications increases so many folds every year to approximately 300 counts on average per year in the last 4 years. Okay, next. Is it turning?
Yeah.
So among all those publications, you can see the neuroscience research appears to be the mainstay and producing much of the publications records. Here, alterations or changes of brain activities are measured in a season of veteran meditators, mainly by two types of analysis. One is on EEG, the other on using neuroimaging systems, especially fMRI, functional MRI, and reports of how meditations may influence emotional and cognitive regulations have started to appear and multiply from there on. Next slide. So alongside neuroscience research, there are also a significant number of clinical and mechanistic research on meditation and health using more cutting-edge biochemical and molecular methods, including those high-throughput platforms such as gene chips. So compared to neuroscience research, this category of research is relatively unknown, less known, despite many interesting findings have been generated and on addressing how meditations can improve psychosomatic health. and which is connected to longevity and prevention of chronic and degenerative diseases. Next slide. So in this presentations, I'm going to give an up-to-date clinical trial and mechanistic findings in a very general overview on how Buddhist meditations can influence psychosomatic health and chronic diseases. My second objective is to link all these findings to those described or recorded in the ancient Buddhist texts, especially in Pali Nikayas and Agama, and especially on the topic of how meditation may heal the ailing body. And the third, the challenges and what are the challenges and limitations facing the current scientific research. So next. Next slide, please. Okay. So what does that mean, psychosomatic? Psychosomatic is a word, it's a compound word composed of psycho, which means mind, and somatic means physical body. So psychosomatic diseases simply means how negative states of mind might be implicated in physical ailments, progression, occurrence, and progressions, particularly which could lead to chronic diseases. As you can see from the pictures, that how the negative states of mind, for example, anger, repressed anger, can contribute to pathologies associated with high blood pressure, heart disease, tensions, headache, and autoimmune disorders, and so on. And those kind of studies have been reported quite frequently in the literature, and but causality is still pretty much unknown. So, but there's a quite clear associations between how the mental health can connect to the physical health. So next slide. So now I'm going to talk to give an overview of clinical and mechanistic studies on meditations and psychosomatic health. So next slide. Okay. So the most recognized target of meditation since the earlier studies back to the 1970s until even recently, right, have shown that the autonomic nervous systems is the one being targeted by the meditations. So basically, the autonomic nervous systems consist of a pair of counterbalancing nervous network, namely the sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous systems. And the sympathetic nervous systems are triggered during physical and psychological stresses, the agents that causes stress is called stressor, resulting in activations of various stress responsive physiological reactions. And whereas the parasympathetic nervous systems counteracts the stress reactions, reversing stress-related restive responses to relaxation and calm. So, and thus, parasympathetic nervous systems has been shown to be particularly sensitive or turned on by meditation practice, resulting in stress reduction and deep relaxations. Next slide. So one of the effects upon activation of this parasympathetic, okay, can you go back to the slide before? Yeah. Upon activation of the parasympathetic nervous systems is reducing the secretion of what we call stress hormones. The most characteristic one is adrenaline, okay? So, and as well as the most biologically active ones. So, and these stress hormones responses to respond to various stress responses, and is regulated by the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis. So connecting the neuroendocrinal, endocrinal, and immunological network and signaling. And when the parasympathetic system is turned on, and there is a corresponding turning off of the opposing pair, the sympathetic nervous systems, which inhibits the production of stress hormones and other associated physiological responses that are associated, that also related to an array of negative health effects. And this is the most signature physiological effects corresponding to stress inductions. Next slide. So what would be the implications of stress reductions through the formal mechanisms, and mediated by the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis can be seen in improved mood and emotions, improved sleep, improved digestion, and improved immune systems. And out of all the systems, the immune systems appear to be the systems that are that are been increasingly recognized to be the target of meditation interventions, and which I will talk about it in the next slide. Okay, next slide, please. So studies have shown that meditations can increase the functions of both innate and acquired immune systems. Innate means the first line defense of immune systems, which does not need to be trained. All right, it's innate, right? And acquired is the ones that have been trained. The vaccinations is actually targeting at the acquired immunity, and the ones, the immune cells associated with acquired immunity will be those T cells and B cells. I hope that you can understand all these technical terms. And these two mechanisms are involved here, it seems, right? And because of these activations of innate and acquired immunity, studies have shown that meditations is contributing to increased resistance to infection, especially flu. And the second one would be when the meditators are compared with the non-meditators, they found that the antibody productions in the meditators increased significantly, compared more than the non-meditators. Next slide. Okay, and this is one aspect. And the meditations, on the other hand, appears to as well reduce the systemic inflammation of the body, and through suppressing this very pernicious, pro-inflammatory signaling called NF-kappa-B signaling pathways. And through this pathway, a lot of these chemical messengers we call cytokines, are increased or regulated in response to inflammatory stimuli, right? So meditation seems to decrease some of this chemical cytokines, especially interleukin 6, interleukin 1 beta, interleukin 2, and TNF alpha. Okay. Next slide. Okay, next slide. Before that, we have this. So in other words, before this slide, there's one sentence I want to know before this. Yes. You see, meditations may probably help in preventing COVID-19 infections and reducing its severity. So I think, I'm not sure whether there are studies being conducted to address this, you see. So next slide. So from here, overall, how the mental being connected to our immune systems and contributing to health preservations is through this diagram. The psychological psychological stress, in long term may lead to systemic inflammations in whole body, and which leads to the higher risk of many kinds of chronic diseases. For example, diabetes, certain cancers, cardiovascular diseases and strokes, and some of the immune-related diseases, particularly autoimmune disorders, and as well as the underlying biological effects in oxidative stress and aging. And aging. Next slide. Now I'm going to talk about how meditations probably can be instrumental in increasing longevity, right? So one of the targets of meditations has been shown in the literature recently is this on telomere. It's called telomere, and telomeres basically is a very important player in the in cellular aging and longevity of the cells. And telomeres basically is the DNA protein cap at the terminals of every chromosome, and critical in protecting DNA stability against cellular aging, hence promoting longevity in an organism. So this discovery of telomere systems actually is so significant that won the discoverers the Nobel Prize of Physiology in 2009. Next slide. Next slide, please. So studies have shown that no, next slide. The slide before this. The slide before this. No. You're going forward. I cannot see that. Going back. Before. After the telomere systems. Yeah. So meditations can prevent the shortening of telomere. So this shortening of telomere is actually an important indicator of cellular aging. And how does it do it? It actually increases, upregulates the genes that synthesizing this enzyme called telomerase, and which makes telomeres. And by this pathway, it contributes to longevity of the cells and as a whole, the organisms. So meditations, how does the meditation do that? And some studies, although it's quite preliminary, shows meditations can actually activate the cellular antioxidants systems to ward off these detrimental free radicals, and which are the most recognized culprits in cellular aging and associated disorders, as well as shortening of telomeres. Next slide, please. And on the other hand, meditations can actually influences our brain function as well, and in terms of even down to the anatomy and structures. So meditations can contribute the neuroplasticity in the brain. And what is neuroplasticity? Neuroplasticity is an ability of the brain to change and adapt to internal and external stimuli, and which can be could be growth and rewiring of nervous connections, or even change of the brain structures and compositions. And in this aspect, it's usually showing a positive signs in preventing neurodegeneration, especially in dementia, implicated in dementia and Alzheimer's disease. Next slide. So in terms of brain structure and compositions, meditations shows in a few studies that it can increase the brain gray matters in the cortex and the limbic systems, and increase the cortical thickness and hippocampus volumes. And in this kind of regulations, which are associated with a positive emotional and cognitive regulations, this actually may underlies a very good evidence that how meditation can actually impact a positive effects on our mental health and emotional regulations. Next slide. And further, meditations has been shown to decrease the risk of hypertension and cardiovascular disease, or CVD disease risk. So here, meditation is shown to decrease the heart rate through the parasympathetic nervous systems, as I shown before. And from there, it can decrease the blood pressure in hypertensive patients. As well as some studies show an indicator called C-reactive proteins were lower, the levels were lower in the meditators. And this C-reactive proteins is associated with an increased risk of cardiovascular disease and diabetes. Next slide. And here, about meditation on pain management. This is pretty much well known, with regard to a meditation, especially in the mindfulness type of these meditations interventions. And the positive effects could be applied, could be seen with chronic and acute pain. And there are two pathways have been associated with this kind of regulations. So meditations can go through a cognitive emotional regulations, which in some way decrease the perceived pain by the meditators. So in that way, psychological control how the people react and perceive the pains. In some way can make the person, can make the patients more manageable towards pain. And another one is actually through the biological pathways, and what are the signals have been discovered to be implicated by meditation interventions. There are at least three here. The first one would be the dopamine. The dopamine usually connected to the reward circuitry, so something that could gives us happiness and joy and satisfactions. And the second one, oxytocin. Oxytocin is associated with positive emotions. And the GABA signaling is usually connected to that tranquility, to make the mind calmer and more in the passive mode. And all these pathways have been shown to be modulated, and which can contribute to mitigating the pain signals. Okay, next slide. Also, okay, I finished all the medical research that's addressing how meditations can improve the psychosomatic health and enhance and contributing to decreased risk of chronic diseases. And now I'm going to address what would be the early Buddhist text in Pali Nikayas and Chinese agamas on health benefits on meditations. Next slide. So here there are a few sutras have shown that have really reported there are two benefits associated from establishing mindfulness of the body, right? And I think there are 7 or 8 of them, and the first two would be overcoming fear, dread, and aversions. And the second one is contributing to tolerating physical and verbal insults. So here in this sutra, it shows that meditations can really help in managing pain. And this appears in Majjhima Nikaya 119, and it's parallel Madhyama Agama 81. And the second one would be reporting one of the main disciples of the Buddha, the Venerable Anuruddha. And once he said to all monks, and at that time he was suffering from this grave disease, and he said, when he was dwelling in these 4 establishments of mindfulness, and he was able to remain calm with all bodily pain. So here it indicates that he's using the emotional or cognitive regulations towards how he perceived the pain, and from there with the possessing right mindfulness and comprehensions, he could actually manage the pain quite effectively. And the Buddhas and was reported uses a meditation to even turn off the pain feeling. So here is the excerpt. By cessation of certain feelings, the Buddha or the Tathagata enters a certain state of concentration of mind or certain attainment. On that occasion, his body is more comfortable. Okay, next slide. Next slide. And then and also a lot of sutras talking about 7 enlightenment factors or awakening factors, which are the mindfulness factor, investigation of dharmas, joy, tranquility, energy, concentration, and wisdom, and equanimity. And when these 7 factors were collected and practiced, and it's been shown to lead to healing of diseases. And this report has been shown in the Buddha and in Venerable Kassapa and Venerable Moggallana, and with all these references. And whereas in Grimananda Sutras, it's also a Parita Sutras, famous in Sri Lanka, Buddhas actually prescribed 10 kinds of this insights contemplations to a sick monk, and later it shows that such contemplations led to his sickness being subdued and cured. Okay, next slide. So in another sutras, quite a number of sutras say that when one who has fully mastery of meditations in terms of this 4 bases of spiritual power or iddhipada, and one can actually extend their lifespan. So here, in some ways, it's pretty much connected to the longevity effects targeting the telomere systems reported in the scientific literature. Next slide. Next slide, please. So I finished all the early Buddhist texts about how the meditation can heal the body. Now I would like to talk about some limitations and shortcomings that are facing the current scientific research right now, right? First off, the studies are primarily concentrated on stress reductions and derived health benefits. And such parameters, such research are pretty much very similarly reported by other relaxation techniques. So you can see similar results being reported with physical exercise, with all sort of therapies like music therapy, yoga, tai chi, yoga, and so on. So here, meditation seems to be perceived as just one of the many relaxation techniques, and it also appears that the meditation does not even reign supreme over the other techniques in exerting the relaxation's result. So, and another thing is that the majority of the scientific research these days, it seems that they have a lot of quite a problem in biases and higher risk of biases. That means most of the clinical studies being done, they are not put in a very rigorous research designs. They are not randomized, and some of them are not blinded. So these are all gold standards that the clinical studies have to adopt in order to give more convincing or more objective results, right? So in these terms, it's pretty much lacking in methodology rigor. It doesn't mean that the meditation research are all in this kind of, do not have a good clinical or human trials being done. Yes, they do, but the numbers are pretty small, right? And some of the biological mechanisms that I just reported are pretty much still very far from conclusive. And which is why nowadays it causes a criticism among the scientific community as well. And it seems to be like driving to saying too much hype than scientifically certain. And why this happens? Because as a non-pharmacological interventions, meditations interventions is all the time facing lack of sufficient funding, because no one is going to fund this kind of studies. So which prevents a more rigorous and large scale investigations to be taken place. Next slide. And what about how does the scientific research affecting the Buddhism as a religion? As we can see, nowadays a lot of Buddhist practices have been secularized, and stripping away a lot of the elements claimed to be quite essential, like ethical and especially like transcendental elements. This will make Buddhism more like a mere mundane, a therapeutic science. Right. And in some way, this can be a destructive act, like of diluting Buddhism, and a threat, and that can be a pretty pounding to the very existence of Buddhism as a religion. Next slide. As well as like concurrent to this, the movement of meditations, right? Interventions, mindfulness movement, and that takes away the mindfulness practice away from all the surrounding religious supportive factors described in the religious text, and may pose a risk to its sustainability and safety as an effective therapy. And this sort of dark sides of meditations are started to be noticed in scientific literature as well. And there is a wide range of transpersonal and mystical phenomena connected with the spiritual dimensions of Buddhist practices are still not largely unexplored. So the need to address this has started to be noticed. So now I have a video clip showing this part. So can we play the video clip?
May I request Paññādīpa to summarize the video clip, because some of them had a problem in terms of sound and other they couldn't see the video. Okay, is that all right?
Oh, it's okay. It's okay. Don't worry. It's actually the clip basically talks about the transcendental, or more in the more spiritual dimensions, sort of effects of meditations have started to be noticed by the scientists, and this is just the beginning. Okay, I think thanks for having me here. Thank you very much for your attention. I hope I could make some of you understand my speech. And sorry for the interruptions.
Okay, I think thank you everyone. So perhaps what we can do is we can have question now. Again, our apologies for technical glitches. But we can take questions.